Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 105, The Note. War Baby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. It can be difficult to pinpoint the exact moment a child's thoughts or actions begin to turn dark, though some believe that children can be born bad, rotten, evil. This week on Murderous Minors, we're back across the pond in Bury, Greater Manchester, UK, to look at the 2006 murder of Joe Geeling by 14-year-old Michael Hamer. He was an isolated, lonely teen whose life began difficult, with his police officer father leaving his mother prior to Hamer's birth. He went on to target the younger, sometimes sickly Joe, who was kind of the light of everyone's life. At St. Gabriel's Roman Catholic High School, he was beloved by teachers who doted on him and by his classmates whom he loved to entertain, even when he was the child who had a reason to feel down. At home, his little brother and parents tried their best to make sure he was healthy and comfortable, and they just loved their little angel, nicknamed Joey G, a helpful chatterbox and football enthusiast. 11-year-old Joe Geeling had been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis as an infant, and at the time of his murder was receiving treatments every day after school, but it didn't stop him from being joyful and outgoing and a child that just loved life. A life led in stark contrast to that of his killer, Michael Hamer. By age 14, Hamer was known for being quote-unquote different at school, quiet and keeping to himself while at the same time being disruptive. Hamer was known to stand in the halls and stare at the other students as they walked by with no emotion whatsoever evident on his face. According to Sir Cary Cooper, professor of organizational psychology and health at Lancaster University, rejection by a parent and the ensuing attachment failure can have devastating effects on the developing psyche, leading to low self-esteem and feelings of worthlessness, even giving rise to antisocial behavior. At home and at school, it seemed that Hamer didn't fit in, and he wasn't comfortable or nurtured in either of the places where he spent the majority of his time. His mother did try, and she referred him to social services for counseling in 2004, at which time he indicated a desire to spend more time with his father, with whom he barely had contact. The teen had also overheard his father telling his mother that he didn't have any feelings for his son. Hamer noted feeling estranged from his family, feeling stressed by fights with his mother and by the bullying at school. By middle school, Hamer was reportedly being picked on continuously, his lunch money taken on a regular basis. A classmate said that Hamer was indeed pelted with verbal insults based on his appearance. However, he lobbed them as well. He brought on some of the drama that enveloped him at school himself by being argumentative and having outbursts as a way to get attention. Given Hamer's difficulty in establishing connections with kids his own age, he had taken to hanging out with younger kids from school when he wasn't self-isolating in his bedroom, playing computer games for hours on end. He'd even sort of role-play, writing out class lists of younger kids and putting himself as the teacher. Combined with his feelings of abandonment, the teen's burgeoning sexuality caused him confusion, and as the school year pressed on, Hamer seemingly began to develop an unhealthy obsession with his young pal. By the start of 2006, the 14-year-old had begun to venture out with his writing projects, drafting the note to Joe Geeling that would eventually lure the boy to his death. He used St. Gabriel High School's mentoring program to shield the ruse. Hamer was Geeling's mentor. On March 1st, 2006, Hamer gave Joe the final draft of the note, pretending it had been written by the school's deputy headmaster. The note read, quote, "Joseph, you have heard. Year 10s have started to mentor Year 7s, and they've been told to take some books to understand the difficulties some people may be having. As you know, Michael is your mentor and will start next week. Unfortunately, Michael has got some of your books but will be unable to return them to you for 2 months due to surgery. So I have spoken to your mom and I have asked her if you could go with Michael to his house and collect them with permission of your mother. I have given the address to your mom and she will meet you at his house at 4:30 p.m. tonight. Sorry for the inconvenience. Deputy Head L. Foley." The note ends with, "Do not discuss this with anyone else as this will cause confusion. Thanks." But Joe did show a friend, and when a teacher got a look, it was determined to be a fraud. Joe was sent directly to the office to show it to the supposed author. The teacher instructed the child to go straight home after school and by no means to go with Michael Hamer. Joe did turn up outside the deputy headmaster's office, but he was seen by the teacher being intercepted by Hamer before he could get inside. Then, by some nauseating twist of fate, the fire alarm rang and everyone quickly evacuated the school, previous concerns wiped from their thoughts for the moment. When school let out at 3:50 p.m., Joe was seen with Hamer, walking away from the direction of his own home and down Manchester Road, toward the older boy's home on Dalton Street, where they arrived shortly after 4 p.m. Earlier drafts of the note given to Joe at lunchtime had devolved into sexual references, police would later say, and Hamer would admit that this was indeed the ultimate reason he lured Joe to his house. Once inside, Hamer said that he tried to initiate some kind of sexual contact with the 11-year-old and ended up retrieving a frying pan from the kitchen, hitting Joe so hard with it that it separated into 2 pieces. Hamer next retrieved 2 knives from the kitchen downstairs, took them back upstairs to his bedroom, and stabbed Joe Geeling multiple times, severing an artery in his neck. His windpipe had been slashed twice, the knife reached his spine, and he clearly had defensive wounds on his hands. He had been stabbed a total of 16 times, after he'd been hit roughly 10 times in the head with the pan, fracturing his eye socket. By 4:30 p.m., the time Joe expected his mother to be picking him up, he had been murdered. He still had the note in his pocket. Hamer's next move is one we're all uncomfortably familiar with. The killer placed Joe's body in a rolling trash can, a wheelie bin there, using it to transfer the tiny body roughly a half-mile away to Whitehead Park, where he was left in what amounted to a shallow grave. While on the way to the park, Hamer's mother, who was due home from work in an hour and a half, called at 4:48 p.m., and he had a perfectly nonchalant conversation with her. He falsely told her the home phone wasn't working and that he had stepped out. She was very interested in where he was and what he was doing. She called him back at 4:52 p.m. when he was still on the grounds of Whitehead Park, and at 5:12 p.m. on the home line after he returned to the house to try and clean up the scene of the murder. When his mother got home from work, she noticed something red spilled on the carpet, and Hamer told her that it was ink from a red pen. He then went upstairs and did a homework assignment on the 10 Commandments. Joe Geeling's family knew that something must be terribly wrong for their young son not to have gotten home on time. By 5:45 p.m., they had reported the young boy missing, and the search began at once. Joe was sick and frail, and being that it was only March 1st, the temperature dropped quickly once the sun went down. The search was carried out by the Greater Manchester Police, for whom Hamer's father still worked, and was surprisingly aided by the Greater Manchester Fire Department, as a member had ties to the missing boy's family, who were also searching, along with members of the community and the Bolton Mountain Rescue Team. The following morning, the 11-year-old's body was found in Whitehead Park around 10:30 a.m. by a canine searcher, and soon after, Michael Hamer was questioned in the boy's disappearance and death. Joe was found in a wooded area to the side of the park, in a ditch covered with rocks, leaves, and abandoned furniture.
There's a wide area of grassland to the rear of the park, and the body was discovered hidden in a gully near to that grassland. Because of the situation that the body was discovered, and because of the forensic investigation that now needs to happen, we will be at the scene for many hours, and it may well be tomorrow morning before we're in a position to give you any further information on that. But we will be working throughout that time.
Hamer was present on time at school that day, March 2nd, 2006, and was brought into the deputy headmaster's office to talk about Joe Geeling and the note. Law enforcement would be next to see him, and upon search of his home, the previous drafts were found in his bedroom.
A 14-year-old boy from St. Gabriel's School has been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the body that's been found this morning. Now, obviously, Joe Geeling remains reported missing from home, and a strong line of inquiry connects these two incidents. Ladies and gentlemen, following the events of yesterday, I can confirm that the body discovered yesterday in Whitehead Park appears to be that of a young boy of school age. I can't be more definite than that at this stage, and the body remains in situ pending further forensic investigation. I said yesterday that was likely to take a long time. It's a very thorough, painstaking and methodical investigation that needs to take place at the scene. That investigation will be ongoing throughout the day and may well go into tomorrow.
Hamer told police that the murderous attack occurred after Joe wouldn't stop touching a picture of his dead half-brother, whom he'd never had the chance to meet, although no such photograph was ever located. It was more than 6 months later, just after his October trial, that Hamer finally admitted that there was a sexual element to his crime. This episode is brought to you by Best Fiends. Summer is starting to wind down, but the stresses of daily life never seem to. So when life and times are getting me down, I love to take a few minutes to myself to play Best Fiends, the easy-to-love, free-to-download Match 3 puzzle game that I can't wait to get back to the moment I stop playing. I can casually play Best Fiends anywhere and not miss out on what's going on around me. But my favorite part is earning new characters and using their unique abilities to play more strategically and with the highest score possible, one level at a time. Best Fiends is so easy to fit into your life and to enjoy, and with thousands of levels ready for you to conquer, there's always more wheels to spin and adorable characters to collect and evolve, with new levels, characters, challenges, and rewards added all the time. Download the 5-star rated puzzle game Best Fiends free today on the App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. Although it was apparent to those that interacted with him that he seemed maladjusted, pre-trial psychiatric evaluation only found him to have the vague diagnosis of attachment disorder due to his failure to bond with his father, but likely his mother as well. She was reportedly a doting mother who moved from the home in which Joe Geeling was murdered as quickly as she could. Hamer was found to have a lower than average IQ, a history of being bullied and isolating himself, and was not diagnosed with any mental health disorders. The prosecutor said, quote, "The murderer targeted his victim, led him away by deception, carried out the killing with significant brutality, and set about covering up his crime in what appears to be a surly, calculating way." On the first day of his trial, October 16, 2006, 15-year-old Michael Hamer pleaded guilty to Joe Geeling's murder and was sentenced to a minimum 12 years incarceration. The judge acknowledged that Hamer had, quote, "significant feelings of distress from the absence of a relationship with his father, and also acknowledged his history of being bullied by his peers." He added that, quote, "I am now told that within the last few days that you have admitted to your attorney, Mr. Steer, and to your solicitor that you made a sexual advance to Joe, who responded by referring to you as gay and threatening to tell others of what you had done. Joe, as you accept, had done absolutely nothing to encourage any such advance. The rejection of the advance was the immediate triggering event of what you did to Joe."
Michael Hamer's actions on the 1st of March were cold, premeditated and chilling. It's clear that he lured Joe away from a place of safety and he had only one thing in mind. I think there's definitely some elements of premeditation. Certainly the writing of the notes up to 3 weeks beforehand proves that. Tom and Gwen still don't know why this has all happened. That's the burning question. They want to know and they need to know, and I think a great many people in this community also want to know. It's something that hasn't yet been resolved in my mind, and only Michael Hamer can tell us that in the future, hopefully.
Both the Geelings and the prosecutor felt that this sentence wasn't sufficient, and on January 30th, 2007, it was increased to 15 years, after which Joe's parents said, quote, "At long last, we feel as though the CPS has finally achieved a more just sentence for our son's killer, and we are very grateful for their efforts and perseverance." In light of current debates on reducing the number of inmates nationwide, we were fearful that a weak decision may have been the route taken. We thank the courts for deliberating for so long and reaching this ruling. Michael Hamer will still be a relatively young man when he's released from prison, but obviously, our personal loss will remain forever. At least for an additional 3 years, the nation will be a slightly safer place, especially for our young children. Personally, we remain skeptical that offenders like Michael Hamer can ever be rehabilitated, and we worry that he will reoffend, but acknowledging the likelihood that he will be released back into society, we hope and pray he gets whatever help he needs so that one day he may recognize the devastation and consequences of his actions and can show some true remorse. Only time will tell now. We are left with no choice but to trust that our legal system has got this right. Hopefully now our family can draw a line under this chapter of events and try to move on again. Following his increase in sentence, Hamer was transferred to the high-security Oswald unit at the Castington Young Offenders Institution, where he stayed with roughly 60 of the country's most violent teenage offenders until he was old enough to be moved to an adult prison. At the same time, a serious case review into the circumstances surrounding the murder of Joe Geeling, ordered by the Barrie Safeguarding Children Board and carried out by the Barrie Council, was taking place, and in August 2007, they'd cleared social services of any blame, saying, quote, "The details recorded in this overview report suggest there are some points where events could have been handled differently." Even with these improvements in place, the panel members thought it highly unlikely that they would have had an impact that could have changed the outcome of the events on 1st March 2006, and the tragic death of Geeling would have been prevented. While the executive director for Children's Services at Barrie Council added, quote, "We know that this tragic incident will leave people wanting to blame someone, particularly when a child so young and precious was taken from his parents, friends, and family. But sometimes we simply cannot protect or prevent tragedies, and there is no one to blame. We've looked into the circumstances and there are improvements we can make, but we're confident that none of these improvements would have reversed the situation." Also in 2007, the Joe Geeling Trust was set up in the 11-year-old's memory and was active for more than 6 years. In 2013, the charity was closed after raising £220,000, which were split between the Cystic Fibrosis Trust and the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital. In December 2016, Hamer had a hearing on his application for a reduced sentence, citing his clean behavioral records and the strides he'd made in coming to terms with his sexuality and living comfortably with it. The court cited his continued immaturity and tendency toward being overly emotional, though they did state that, quote, "He's clearly highly committed to achieving a better understanding of himself. It is apparent, reading the reports, that he accepts responsibility. He confessed to it on arrest and pleaded guilty. However, I have not been able to detect from the reports the extent of his expressed remorse. All the reports I have read, while being uniformly positive about his progress so far, record that there is still further work to be done." His request was denied. Michael Hamer is 30 years old and became eligible for parole this year, in March 2021. Following his sentencing, Hamer's father also released a statement through his employer, the Greater Manchester Police, that read in part, quote, "I am appalled and horrified by the death of Joe Geeling. The lives of 2 boys have been destroyed, and this has impacted indelibly on many people, both young and old, but none more than Mr. and Mrs. Geeling, their young son, and their family and friends. My thoughts are entirely with them." As always, thanks for listening. Be back in a week with an all-new episode, but until then, lovelies, stay safe and don't be scared.